The effect of anxiety on the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. We need to consider that anxiety has strong physiological and cognitive components, and it's unclear what the mechanism is that affects the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. Whether it's a cognitive effect in altering normal mechanisms of attention and perception for an event, or physiological in terms of changed brain chemistry influencing the memory storage process or consolidation process. Research evidence for the actual effect of anxiety is mixed. There are essentially two possibilities. Firstly, heightened levels of anxiety have a negative effect on eyewitness testimony accuracy. And secondly, heightened levels of anxiety have a positive effect on eyewitness testimony accuracy. For example, Deffenbacher et al. 2000, in a meta-analysis of 18 studies between 1974 and 1997, found that heightened stress had a negative effect on eyewitness testimony accuracy in adults, though interestingly the effect was non-significant in children. The implication here is that high levels of stress or anxiety impact negatively on eyewitness testimony accuracy. However, Christensen and Hubinet, 1993, in questioning 58 real witnesses to bank robberies, found that those who had been directly threatened in some way were more accurate and remembered more detail than those who were not directly threatened. This was also true 15 months later. The implication here is that high levels of anxiety impact positively on eyewitness testimony accuracy. So, why do we have such contradictory evidence? There is a way we can resolve such apparently contradictory findings. That is by understanding that the relationship between anxiety and accuracy is not a simple straight-line correlation. Instead, it could be a more complex curvy linear relationship, as can be seen in the inverted U theory of anxiety and performance, or the Yerkes-Dodson law. That is, there is an optimum level of arousal or anxiety at which performance is also optimal. Anything suboptimal in terms of arousal or anxiety, either too high or too low, will result in reduced performance. Let's consider an explanation of anxiety having a negative effect on eyewitness accuracy. Weapons focus. The idea is that under conditions of high anxiety, attentional focus may be narrowed and focused to specific aspects of information, such as a weapon. Johnson and Scott, 1976, exposed participants to a situation where they saw a man leave through a room that they were waiting in. In a high anxiety condition, he was carrying a knife and had bloody hands. In a low anxiety condition, he had greasy hands and was carrying a pen. When participants were asked to identify the man from a series of photographs later, accuracy was poorer for the high anxiety condition. Accuracy in the high anxiety condition was about 33%, accuracy in the low anxiety condition was about 49%. Loftus et al. 1987 replicated these findings in a study showing slides to a participant. And Stebley, 1982, in a meta-analysis, concluded that the presence of a weapon reduces the chances of a correct identification of the person holding it. Loftus et al. 1987, using eye tracking technology, was able to confirm that eye movements are indeed drawn to focus on the weapon itself. One really interesting real-world example of accuracy of eyewitness and anxiety can be seen in Riniolo et al. 2003. They report that survivors of the Titanic claimed it was breaking up when it sank. However, the official report was that it sank in one piece, and that anything that suggested otherwise was due to anxiety caused by the traumatic event. However, when the Titanic was discovered again in 1985, they were proved right, and it was found in two pieces. Evaluation of research looking at the effect of anxiety on eyewitness testimony accuracy. One limitation of research looking at the effect of anxiety is that even explanations such as the inverted U theory, which can account for very different research results, may be too simplistic. This is because it considers just one factor influencing accuracy, yet we need to consider that there are likely to be multiple factors at work, such as cognitive, behavioural, physical, and emotional. More complex considerations have been put forward using multidimensional maths such as catastrophe theory. These can explain how tiny changes in one factor out of many can have dramatic changes in performance. Another limitation is studies of real-life events can lack control. Even though they have the benefit of ecological validity compared with lab experiments, other things will happen to participants that the researchers have no control over, such as post-event discussion or police interview. These will act as potential confounding variables which may then influence the accuracy of the eyewitness testimony rather than the anxiety of the original incident. Another limitation of research into the effect of anxiety on eyewitness testimony is that there are potential ethical issues in creating anxiety for the procedure in research. This is a problem because it may be in conflict with the ethical guideline of protection from harm, either psychological or physiological. For this reason, studies of real-life witnesses, such as in Ewell and Cutshall's 1976 Canadian gun shop robbery study, where real witnesses who had been most distressed were found to be the most reliable, are so valuable. Not only do they have more ecological validity, but they avoid the need for the research to manipulate anxiety as a variable. A final limitation is that we may be mistaken in thinking that anxiety is the key factor. Pickle, 1998, suggested that it might be surprise or novelty rather than anxiety that focuses attention. In an experiment where somebody walked into a hairdresser's carrying different objects, Pickle manipulated surprise and anxiety by having them carry a range of objects which had high or low threat and high or low surprise. The high surprise objects led to the poorest identification of the person carrying them. So, a gun, which was high threat and high surprised, had a similar negative effect to a raw chicken, which had low threat but high surprise. The implication here is that anxiety by itself is not the sole consideration in influencing the accuracy of eyewitness testimony.